here in Austin. You have Jaime Martinez. He's our Director of Planning, correct?
Hello, yes.
We had Stuart Kahan in there. He's our attorney. And I'm going to let the rest of the HPC work kind of introduce himself. But I would like, if you can contact me, I would love to have a deeper conversation on your background. It's always fascinating. So you can reach me on our website. I mean, you can definitely
that was
go
my
to
question.
Website.
So
yes, if you go to our website, it's usually my email address will be quesada@villageofaustin.org, and I would love to get in contact with you at some point. You know, whenever you have a minute. So I would love to find out more about you and what you know. What
I could contribute.
What kind of findings have you done?
Yeah, I've only done a couple of local excavations up in Putnam Valley. So not too many around the area, but you know, I don't want to date myself, 30 years of archaeological experience. So it'll be if I can bring something to the table, I'd be more than happy to. So I'll look you up on the website.
Yes,
so
please. Yes.
Okay.
Definitely. All right. Sorry about that. Sorry guys for taking over sort of part of the
meeting.
I'm gonna take off myself now for now. Sorry.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I myself had trouble logging on this evening. I've been having trouble with my village email, and I'll have to do something about that soon. Perhaps Dana White has also had the same problems this evening. I have not heard from Dana, so she may show up. Why don't we start with a roll call? This is Adam Markovic speaking.
Joyce Cole.
Steve Casey.
Catherine Wilson.
Phil Ferranda.
You also have Jaime Martinez, Planning Director, as well as Stuart Kahn and Trustee Quesada.
Okay, very, very good. Good evening, Jaime, Joyce, Catherine, Stephen, Phil, Manny, and Stuart. Good evening to all of you. And thanks for being here this evening. I think this will be a brief meeting. There is nothing on the agenda other than ongoing longer term projects. There are no applicants before us this evening. I heard in advance of tonight's meeting from Commission member Julia Quinn, who I believe has been a Commission member for about a year now. She advised me that she would not be in attendance this evening and that it was her regrettable intention to step down from the HPC. So that's effective immediately. She wishes the HPC well, but I think it's a matter of personal commitments becoming overwhelming and other interests. Be that as it may, she is no longer going to be an HPC member. That would leave 6 of us. Stuart, do you have any thoughts about filling the vacancy? I know I'm just dropping this on you. I learned this myself about 20 minutes ago.
I have to check with the manager as it is a managerial appointment.
I'm sorry, Stuart, that's my
We'll have to check with the manager because it's a managerial appointment. I do not know if there are people who have otherwise applied for the HPC positions.
Okay.
Sorry, Adam, for interrupt. So I will. That's something that Karen and I have talked in the past. So I will also follow up with her tomorrow as well. Some other items that I have to talk to her as well. So, but I'm really sorry that Julie had to step down. Very sad of that. Thank you.
By the way, Dana White has joined the call.
Okay, good evening, Dana, wherever you are. And thank you, Manny, for passing along that information to the village manager. Dana, I announced at the outset that Commission member Julia Quinn is stepping down from the HPC effective immediately. And Manny Quezada will be speaking to the village manager about whether there have been any applicants for the previous vacancies, perhaps still waiting in the wings. I know there were supposed to be alternates at one point in time. Perhaps one of those alternates may be tapped for this vacancy. Okay, so I think the only formal item on the agenda is the high school essay contest. I made some nice headway with that between our last meeting and today. I emailed a copy of the high school essay contest proposal to the superintendent of the Ossining School District, Ray Sanchez, who received it enthusiastically, and in turn forwarded the proposal on to the high school principal for Ossining High School, who received it enthusiastically, and who in turn forwarded the proposal to, I believe, the head of the social studies unit. I'm not sure of her title offhand. Her name is Miss Puelo, who I corresponded with really in just the last few days leading up to this evening's meeting. And I think Miss Puelo is the person who ultimately is going to give us specific comments and or criticisms about the proposal in the form we submitted it, and we'll have ideas about how to roll out the contest, other rules that she may believe or guidelines that she may believe are appropriate to add or change. So while I had hoped to have this sort of buttoned up by this evening, I unfortunately don't have that news to report. Moving swiftly, I think. And the reception so far has been favorable and positive. So I'm optimistic that that the high school is interested in partnering with the HPC in this, and hopefully this will be rolled out soon. Does anyone have any questions about that? Does everyone know how to use the raise your hand feature? I just learned how to do that myself on Zoom. You don't have to, you can just speak up.
Adam, I have a question.
Phil, that's the old-fashioned raise your hand. That's very good, Phil.
I do have a question. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Joyce.
So the question is, will the school be flushing out how the essay will be handed in, if it's to be digital or handwritten? Is that something that you're going to leave up to the school to kind of make that determination of what's best for the student?
Yeah, I had really hoped to set a date for Miss Puelo, who I believe is really the contact person at the high school, to hash out all of those logistical details with us. And I'm sorry for not making this clear. Joyce had expressed a particular interest in this project and I CC'd them both on some of the correspondence, not, I believe, the more recent correspondence with Ms. Puelo, trying to set down a date and time to discuss this. I even invited her to attend this evening's meeting, but I'm waiting to hear back. Understandably, folks are, this is still a very strange time. We're not through this yet. It's gotten stranger over the weekend for other very regrettable reasons. So, you know, I will follow up with Ms. Puelo if I don't hear in the next week or so, and try to set up a time, maybe by Zoom, and maybe the village can help facilitate this for a smaller meeting, maybe with me and Joyce and Phil to hash out the details, Joyce, you just mentioned.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Sure.
I can set up any Zoom meeting that you need. So all you would really need to do is just tell me when, and where, and not really where, but when, and I will set it up and email everybody out. So.
Okay, thank you, Jaime. I appreciate it. And Jaime and Stuart, again, I mentioned that I've been having problems with my village email. I hope to get it resolved by the end of this week. Earlier this evening, I emailed scanned PDFs of 2 certificates of appropriateness. Have you received those?
I did.
Okay.
Have you reached out to Mr. Cooper?
If all goes well, I'm going to take some time off this Friday, and I will get in touch with. It's Craig Cooper, right?
Craig Cooper, yeah.
Yeah, I will try to reach out to him.
Yeah, if you want to, I don't know if you had any intention to, but if you have some intention of trying to get into the village space, I have to check with, check to see if it's possible. But I usually work from home, but I can certainly come in and meet you there to see if we can help facilitate the conversation if there's any challenges otherwise. But you can also just email me or call me on my phone. I believe you may have my phone. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure that I do, but I'll continue this maybe after the meeting with you, Jaime. I appreciate it.
Okay.
While we're talking about technological issues, I believe everyone on this call has a village email account at this point, right? Okay, good. Yeah, I think Steve and Joyce, you're the newest comers. So I'm glad to hear you've gotten that set up. And it appears we've lost Dana, but she may be back. Okay, so that takes care of the only formal agenda item. I had one additional thought, which I'll get into in a minute, and then we'll open it up to anything that's on any of your minds. There was circulated a number of weeks ago, I think by Jamie Kane, although I can't be certain, a grant opportunity to submit an application for a historic marker through, I think it's called the Pomeroy Foundation. Does anyone recall this email correspondence about the Pomeroy Foundation grant? These are these cast iron signs that you see all over New York State, you know, on or adjacent to existing or once existing historic sites that say a little significance of the site. That's what these markers are. There's a fast approaching deadline, real fast. I believe there's a sort of preliminary deadline next Monday for expressing an intent to submit a more formal application sometime in July. If anyone on the call is sort of particularly moved by this opportunity, I understand time is extremely tight on this one, but if anyone is, as I say, moved by this opportunity and would like to discuss it further with me, either now or later, please let me know. Just for instance, and I'm sorry Dana had dropped out, this part of the conversation, but she had, I think, expressed an interest in perhaps obtaining a marker for
We have Dana White back.
the Danish.
She's been upgraded. Yeah, she was in the attendee pool. I was able to move her into the panelist pool.
Dana, are you there? While we're waiting for Dana, as memory serves me, I think she had mentioned an interest in creating or submitting an application for a marker for the Campwoods sort of community, just as an example. And I think there's enthusiasm in that community for, you know, recognizing the historic significance of the community, and the community, you know, would be available, I believe, to assist. And if Dana doesn't show up in a minute or two, I may discuss this with her further after tonight's meeting.
Campwoods is a great idea.
I have online, like the Pomeroy Foundation, the New York State Historic Marker Grant Program. If you'd like, I can share my screen so that people can see what it looks like if there's an interest.
I definitely think it'd be a good idea to take advantage of it if we can.
Okay,
Find
I'm gonna.
something to appropriately mark.
All right, so this is the New York State Historic Marker Grant Program. It can be found at wgpfoundation.org. And this is how it works. It's pretty straightforward. I'm not very familiar with it. I don't think I know any. I certainly don't know any more than Adam does, than our chairman. But this is it. So it would. I'm not sure. Do we have any of these here locally?
I'm aware of two. I'm aware of one located in the Sparta Cemetery for the Leatherman, the alleged burial site of the Leatherman. I'm also aware of one on Route 9, sort of at the periphery of the historic district, in front of what I believe is Maria's Pizza, which was once a hotel on the Albany Post Road, called, I think, the Union Hotel.
Yep.
There may be others, but those are the two I'm fairly certain are Pomeroy signs.
I believe there's another one as you're driving north on, what is it, 9A, and you pass the Presbyterian Church shortly before there, and it's to, I can't remember, an individual who lived in Ossining. The name is still in the town. I believe fought in the Revolution or the Civil War, but there is a marker shortly before you get to the Presbyterian Church there.
Thank you, Stephen. And it'd be interesting to know, you know, the HPC is still, as a body, relatively young. I mean, I've got 3 some odd years under my belt. It'd be interesting to know if the HPC was involved in those previous undertakings with the Pomeroy Foundation. I'm not aware that any of those signs were, you know, projects of the HPC or in partnership with the HPC in the last 3 years. But it's certainly a worthwhile project. If anyone on the call is interested and has the time, which is really tight, I'm sorry for not calling attention to this at our last meeting. Just let me know. And again, I may follow up with Dana about this, about Campwoods. Thank you, Jaime, for sharing this screen. That's it for me. Oh, and I just got a text from Dana who says that she can't get in. I had difficulty myself tonight, but I've been having all kinds of difficulty with Village email. Well, I'm inclined to open it up to the group. If anyone has anything in particular on your mind in regard to historic preservation, what the HPC is up to, or should be up to now, should the HPC's priorities shift in any way, given all of the things that have been going on in the world, please share.
Well, some of the members decide to interact. I'm going to participate for a few minutes, if I may. I just want to kind of bring the HPC attention a little bit of what the comp plan is going for and what we're trying to do and accomplish. And I'm going to ask Jaime to help me out and kind of give a brief description and what are the next steps on the comp plan. We are preparing ourselves to start a subcommittee with different categories. I urge the members, the HPC, to kind of go back and look a little bit of the previous meetings. There are in Zoom, just to kind of give you guys an update in what we've been doing and what is going on in now level. And obviously some of the parts I had mentioned to the HPC before it has to do with the downtown and what happens on the historic district that we have there now, and what could be happening across the street from Main Street, the parking lots at Market Square. And that's something I believe the HPC should definitely be involved as sort of like an overlay or something along those lines to actually protect the history, or try to have some sort of cohesive architectural designs within the NAS. So if I may, Jaime, you want to fill the rest of the HPC in regards to what we've been doing on the comp plan portion of our meetings?
Sure thing. Well, thank you, Trustee Quesada. So as some of you are probably aware, the comprehensive plan process has started. It started, I guess it's been about 2 months now. So I think I want to say it started in earnest shortly after I started here. We hired a consultant either a few weeks or maybe a month or so before I started in March, mid-March. And so we've kind of gotten through the process now where we're starting to do a lot of the background information, starting to do public engagement to ask people their opinions, what are the things they'd like to see change. They've developed the outline of the plan itself, and the next step in the process is to continue with sort of this really robust community engagement process. So there's a couple of different ways that they're approaching the community engagement. One is through stakeholder meetings. And so the stakeholder groups are going to be coming together around specific topics and elements of the plan, whether that's talking about religious, cultural, or historical, or business community, or different people who are involved with affordable housing.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, it's Dana. I just called in.
Hi, Dana.
Hi, Dana. It's Jaime.
I'm sorry, I could not get in.
I added you a couple of times. I promoted you to panelist.
I know,
at one point,
it never went through. I mean, one time it went through, but you couldn't hear me. It's just what's happened. I don't know. So anyway, I'll have to do it this way this time.
Okay, great. All right, so the process right now is moving together pretty heavily with the stakeholder meetings, but we're also going through the ideas wall. So if I can, I'm going to share my screen again. I want to show you a couple of different elements. One, the outline of the plan, and then the second being the ideas wall, which I think are a place where you as board members can really go and engage with the process. So first, my screen. So if you go to the Ossining comprehensive plan page, it's actually osseningtomorrow.com. So it's been, there was a naming process. We put it out to the community. We didn't get a whole lot of responses from the community on the best possible name. But the name that ended up on top was Ossining Tomorrow, which I think is a fantastic name. Kind of, points to the sort of forward-looking intention of this plan to really kind of take Ossining into the future and come up with a plan that meets all the criteria of what the community really wants. So the plan overall has about 10 chapters, or will have 10 chapters. There's the introductory chapter, the village and regional overview, which a draft has been prepared for that. The land use and zoning, which has had a draft prepared for that. And then there's also chapters on the waterfront, the downtown Crescent economic development, transportation, sustainable infrastructure, housing and neighborhood preservation. And then at the end, it's cultural and historic resources. And finally, all this is kind of summed up together in an action agenda with implementation, which essentially points to, the idea that the comprehensive plan is going to have a lot of recommendations for changes, either getting made to the zoning code or, movements towards various different things to help kind of move forward with the plan. So my understanding is that the last plan that came out in 2009 had over 50 recommendations, most of which were enacted. I'm not sure if the Historic Preservation Committee is something that came out of the 2009 plan, but those are the types of things that you do sometimes see out of plans where new special committees are created to focus on critical components of the plan. Now, if you go to the comprehensive plan page, you'll see this stuff on the input to get your input on plan. This is for the ideas wall. So I want to take everybody to the ideas wall, which is really pretty cool, and it's getting some traction. Oh no, that doesn't make it look like it's getting traction. There it is. Okay. So if you go here, essentially you can put an idea on the page and then people can like it or dislike it to sort of prompt it up and down to get people engaged in what they're interested in. So there have been quite a few different topics here. They're all kind of color coordinated. So it's from housing, neighborhoods, transportation, economic development, culture and history, municipal facilities, and sustainability. And say we're interested in specifically the cultural and historic ones. You can see, let me guess this. So the ones that come up so far is they would like, one person recommends establishing a historic Ossining tourism consortium to assess the viability of developing historical, cultural, and community-oriented tourism program. Somebody's mentioned that we should honor longtime Ossining resident and writer John Cheever. Another person mentioned that there should be more public art, murals, things like that. And again, this is historic preservation and cultural. So it's culture and history together. So that's how they fall into that. But there's a bunch of other comments, whether it's from, talking about taxes or parking or, environmental issues and things of that nature. So this is a really good place. I think that you can yourself engage and putting up ideas that you think that the village should look at, but it's also something that you can forward to your networks and tell people that in the community that want to have their voice heard. Say, hey, go put it up on the ideas wall. And the important thing to note is that we look at this, we're reading this. This is going to be factored into the plan. And because of the COVID crisis, a lot of the engagement that people need to do now really is going to be online. So this is one of the easiest ways to engage when you're not able to go to a public hearing. Think about it in the same way. Like if you were to go to a public hearing, we have, 2 public hearings on the comprehensive plan to really get a lot of user engagement, feedback on top of the stakeholder meetings. Now those stakeholder meetings are being held online. And if we're able to, we're going to have public meetings. But if we're not, a lot of that engagement is going to have to take place through a virtual town hall like they did with, with the questions around the DPW site. about 6 weeks ago, and it would take place the same way. But this is something that's open all the time that you can kind of engage in, to let people know about what you're interested in seeing, and also a chance to see what other people are interested in seeing. And if you like the ideas, then you can sort of give them a thumbs up. And if you dislike the ideas, if you think they're bad ideas, then you can sort of give them a thumbs down. We can all kind of engage with each other in the process. So it's really cool. I've made this refrain a few times, but the comprehensive plan really is the most consequential piece of planning that a municipality is going to do for the duration of that plan. For us, it's in over a decade. This is the most important thing that we'll be able to do, because it really sets the framework for everything we're going to do for the next 10 years. So it's really important to get it right. It's really important to make sure that we're pushing forward a plan that the community can support, and that we're pushing forward a plan that's viable, that's actually going to yield us good results. So it's really important that people get engaged in the process. Any questions?
Yeah, I believe I saw some email correspondence a few days ago indicating that Catherine Wilson was going to be involved in this process in some way. Am I imagining that, Catherine?
No, you're not imagining it. I got an email just to ask, well, I thought it was for all of the members of the HPC, but asking if I'd be willing to participate in a subcommittee of HPC members. And I said, yes, I'm available to participate in that. That's the extent of the communication I've gotten about it.
Well, give me a second. Let me before I say anything to you.
Yeah,
I thought more people were getting that. I thought the whole HPC was getting it.
I believe, because I had a conversation with a member or two on the zoning board, I believe there should be a minimum, and I could be, please, Jaime, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe we're supposed to be at least 2 members from each board. I have not seen that email myself. That was probably an internal email that was sent out by Karen and by Jaime, maybe. But
Yeah,
I-
I have to say I received the email as well, and I also said that I would be interested.
I thought the whole HPC was being added to the historic, to the one for historic and cultural. I'm not sure. Maybe it is not the whole board, but I thought it was the entire HPC was going to be invited to engage in that process. I don't think there's no desire to limit the number of people who can engage in that process. I can tell you that right now. The desire is to get as many people as possible. So if there are others who did not receive an email, then it could be that the email just hasn't gone out yet. It could be that if it's not that the email hasn't gone out yet, that it bounced back. I know that on Friday last week they were sending out emails like every 5 or 10 minutes, but they're not the kind of thing where you can sort of like do a blast to everybody. Essentially, they're personal emails that are going out to every individual. And between all the different subcommittees, there's at least 100 people on the list. And there's a lot of emails that have to go out. So I'll have to check. But I can get an answer back to everybody. Has anybody else besides Stephen and Catherine gotten an email in regards to engaging in it? You did, Joyce?
Yes, I did.
Okay, all right. Adam, did you?
I am not sure.
Okay, all right. Phil, did you?
Would it have been sent to the village email?
It would have, yeah.
And who's the sender?
It probably comes under the cover of Karen DeTore.
Okay, going back to the middle of
Friday?
May, okay. No, I don't have anything.
Yeah, if it came from Karen DeTore, I don't think I received any email directly
It
from
came
her.
from Jamie.
Oh, it came from Jamie?
It came from
Yeah.
Okay, Jamie Hoffman then.
Yes.
Jamie Kane.
Jamie Kane?
Yeah. On
Okay,
behalf of Karen. Yeah.
all right, let me check. I thought I saw these emails go out last week on Friday, and it was
Hoffman, sorry, yeah,
I
Hoffman.
got it from Jamie
what's Hoffman? Yeah, Jamie Hoffman. Okay.
on May 15th.
May 15th, let me look.
May 15th.
May 15th, yeah.
Well, I have something from Jamie Kane with the June agenda.
It came again on May 27th at 5:47, saying that she didn't hear back from us, so it must have been bouncing back to a lot of us.
Oh, yeah, then that must be what it is. Yeah, I've been seeing these, maybe it wasn't Friday, yeah, it was Wednesday, but I've been seeing these emails
Yeah, there was a follow-up, right?
coming in bulk. Yeah, so
It
I didn't get CC'd on every single one of them, so I'm not sure about all of them.
You know,
Um,
the email that I'm looking at, it just has 5 names on it.
What 5 names are those?
The CGB Wilson, J. Phillip, Joyce Cole, Julia Quinn, and myself.
Do you know what email they used for me?
Yeah, they used my Gmail and they used I assume your business email, jphillip.com.
The one I had, yeah, this is the one I had.
So, Jaime, would you mind following up with Jamie tomorrow and Karen to
Yeah.
explain this out and try to figure it out? I mean, I guess my question will be, is any other member from the HPC will be interested in being part of this?
Yeah. I will follow up, but I am pretty confident that all of you were invited or intended to be invited.
I have it, and I don't know how it's flew under my radar, but I
Okay.
will. And it's from Mayor Geardy. Well, it was sent by Jamie Hoffman, but it's from Mayor.
Okay. All right.
Mystery solved.
Mhm.
Yeah, to echo Manny's remarks, Jaime, if you could sort of get to the bottom of this email mystery and let us know. As you said, this is a very important document for the future of land use in the village, and I think everyone on the HPC should have some level of involvement.
My recollection is way back when I was a member in HPC and we were doing the architectural guidelines, the whole board was part of the review process. The whole HPC was a very component of what that means. So I would like, obviously, the HPC to be very involved on this process in the areas where we are needed, and we are looking the whole overall of the village. So I think it's important for you guys to actually be part of this whole process. So please, Jaime, tomorrow let's figure this out and get back to them as soon as possible, please.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, absolutely, I will do that. I would note that, I think we lost Manny. Did we just lose Manny?
No,
I'm here.
he's still here.
Oh, no, we lost somebody. Okay. Or maybe we didn't. All right. You just moved. You're bouncing around my screen. I've noticed in the short time that I've been here that Ossining really is, the history of Ossining is really, I think, central in many ways to the culture of the community. And so, definitely the HPC should be very engaged in this process. I think it's important.
How long have you been here?
Only 2.5 months, I guess now.
Where are you coming from?
I'm work-wise, I was in Yonkers.
Oh, okay.
I live in Yonkers as well. I'm not originally from here, but I'm not originally from Yonkers either. But I've been here I've been in New York for 17 years.
Okay.
So I'm like a lot of other New Yorkers. I moved here. Yeah. So I mean, Ossining is definitely. I feel like the history of Ossining is something that's really kind of a key piece to it. And so it's something that I think everybody in the community that I speak to really treasures the history of Ossining. So in that respect, it's really, even I think more important that the HPC plays a big role in the comp plan.
Okay.
I'll just chime in briefly. This is a very strange time, Jaime, for you to be starting in this new position. It's just really an insane time. And you and I haven't had a chance to speak much about what the HPC does and what we hope to achieve going forward. But let me just briefly say this. The village has, from a historic preservation perspective, experienced a number of very painful episodes, really over the last 30 years, plus years. You have behind you a picture of Main Street. And you'll note that there's only one half of that street that exists, the north side. The entire side, which included buildings of comparable value, were demolished and torn down in the 60s and 70s. And then, fast forwarding through the years and the decades, more and more historic buildings have been coming down as more and more pressure has come to bear on Ossining as a Hudson River town. Real estate values have gone up and up and up. There's tremendous pressures for, large residential developments to be built, regardless of the historic context, architectural context. Without mentioning specifics, there have been, in my view, some extremely unfortunate large-scale developments in the village that have served the interests of developers rather than the community, and have not at all been sensitive to the architectural and historic fabric of the community. And most recently, and as was the subject of extensive discussion before the HPC, a National Register listed landmark, the Brandreth Pill Factory, a 19th century factory that had stood on the waterfront from 1860 to approximately, 2013, was demolished in the interest of a developer who wanted to add to the village's housing stock by putting up another large-scale residential development. So the pressures for development in Ossining, at least up until the pandemic, and maybe now or another time to hear Phil's view about his take on what development is going to look like going forward. But in the lead up to this time, the pressures have been enormous to tear down and build up. And, HPC in Ossining, in my view, is really where the rubber hits the road for historic preservation. We're not a community like, a Bedford or another affluent place that has a charming, perfectly preserved historic core where everyone is in favor of keeping it the way it is. And there is no pressure for large-scale development to take place because the community wouldn't tolerate it. Here, it's where the pressures are, and the pressures are intense. And so a Historic Preservation Commission in Ossining really has its work cut out for it in terms of saving buildings, raising awareness, and that's what we're about in a nutshell. And I'd leave it to any one of my very, very able colleagues, newcomers included, Joyce and Stephen. I know you're both passionate about historic preservation. You both have deep roots in this community. Please, if you'd like to chime in and just share your thoughts with Jaime, it may be useful, considering we don't have any applicants in front of us. But no pressure. I mean, this was just off the cuff.
Right. One of the charming things about this town is that view behind you there, and the architecture that has been preserved. I live on Ellis Place. I live in one of the Three Sisters, and one of the things that attracted us to this village was the Victorian architecture along the street. And you know, I really am passionate about the importance of preserving this kind of fabric, both for this village and for the state and for the country. You know, the constant tearing down of sound buildings that could in fact be repurposed to other things with sometimes not even a lot of imagination. Developers, as Adam said, just find it easier, just rip it down, or what is it called, demolition by neglect, let it go so bad that there is no other choice. But yeah, if the other side of that street is ever rebuilt, it would be important to have that rebuilt in a way that's sensitive to the existing architecture along that street. But it's what makes this village attractive. And you know, I think a lot of us know, and as Adam has pointed out, there is a lot of pressure. The price is going up in Manhattan, although it'll be interesting to see how that develops now. Read that real estate agents in Westchester are experiencing a 50% uptick in business compared to last year. You know, I've talked to a few friends of mine work down in Manhattan and are going nuts in their apartments and saying, you know, why am I living down here? So there may be further pressure for housing and people moving up. But I think it's important that any development that happens in a historically sensitive way. And I mean, you know, somebody I read quickly while you were showing that idea board. You know, John Cheever lived here. That's, you know, something that could be recognized and remarked on. But somebody like Sojourner Truth lived here for a number of years as well. Famous both abolitionist and very, very vocal and early member of the women's rights movement. And you know, things like that should be preserved. That might be an interesting idea for a marker, in fact, now that I'm thinking of it. I don't know where she lived in the town. I don't even know if her house would still be here, but that would be an interesting thing.
Well, you know, you guys, I think y'all are both bringing up kind of maybe a useful opportunity in this meeting where there is no other agenda item. You know, I really would be interested in hearing from everybody here, if you're willing to give me your 2-minute like spiel about, you know, what role you think the HPC plays, should play, and kind of where you see the direction of development for the village as a whole. And ask me some questions. You know, we're just kind of getting to know each other. I've been working in planning for over a decade. So if you have any questions about me or my experience or my opinion on things, I'd be, you know, happy to share it with you. I've worked as a planning commissioner. I've worked for the last 3.5 years. I was running the Yonkers Downtown Business Improvement District. I went to NYU and got my degree in urban planning and graduated in 2007. So I have some experience that perhaps you may be interested in hearing about, but I'm really interested in hearing about you and a little bit about how you see the direction of this commission moving forward, and kind of the, you know, what you know has been successful in the past and what you'd like to see more of, and how things should be approached. So.
Hi, Mayor. I just would like to add what Adam was saying. My family does have very deep roots. We've been here since the late 1800s. And obviously I wasn't here, but I did, through my research, saw evolution of Ossining, and progression is good, but not at the expense of the integrity of this beautiful, charming, small town that we have. And yes, the developments are nice, but we live in a small town. I think we enjoy that. That's charming, and that it's small, and that, you know, we should be moving forward, but really not at the expense of this charming, beautiful town that we have.
Okay. I think we lost Joyce.
Oh, she froze up.
She froze up on me.
Froze up.
Joyce,
Yeah.
she froze.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to defrost her.
All right. Phil and Catherine, would you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
We
Yeah.
lost you there for a second.
We lost your video, but we can hear you. Did we lose her again?
We need better Wi-Fi in Ossining also.
Am I here?
Better Wi-Fi in Austin. Yeah. Yeah, I can hear you, Joyce. Do you want to go again? Yeah.
You heard? Did you hear anything I said?
About the first 30 seconds.
Integrity of the village.
Yeah. So to sum it back all up is just that my family's been here since the late 1800s, and just seeing through the history and following it, it has been a great evolution of Ossining, and the developments are, I love looking at that picture behind you, because it's the same integrity we have with some upgrades, and that's beautiful, but just bursting at the seams, Ossining is not attractive to me. I love living in a charming, beautiful, small town, and that's what it is. So I think we should be staying in line with that, making improvements on the beautiful architecture we have, and not trying to change what's not broken. It's not broken, it's beautiful.
Thank you. Phil and Catherine?
I think that the original sin of the village is that we've destroyed too many significant buildings. So the south side of Main Street that Adam referred to, where Market Square now sits was the Starling Building, which was a Art Deco 30s era beautiful building, and it's just a shame that it's gone. So, I mean, we've got a pretty narrow purview, preserving historically significant structures. And sometimes we get pushback. People think we're overstepping our reach, or that we're flexing our muscles for the sake of flexing them. We had a very unpleasant set of meetings with the condo on Spring Street, where the Sing Sing warden's house is. And there's pushback from time to time. So that's where I see the purview. I don't know that we really get a vote on new development unless it actually affects historically designated or historically significant structures. There was a reference earlier today about Market Square. I wasn't sure if it is.
Well, so new developments, yeah, you would, in certain instances, you might not get it referred to you correctly, but historic preservation, depending on the type of development and the size of the development, if it goes through a long form EAF process, it does have to consider the impact on surrounding properties. If those properties are historic, then that has to be considered as a part of the environmental review process. I'm not sure whether or not that necessarily would go to the HPC, and I'm not sure that necessarily it should go to the HPC. But certainly, if there are historic resources that are going to be of impact are going to be impacted by new development where you think there needs to be some additional consideration given in those developments, then you may want to bring it up. I think that there are decisions that are made every day in the development of buildings to try to make them more contextual to what's going on in the neighborhood. So you may have old neighborhoods that were built in the early 1900s, and then a new building needs to pop up, and so you can sort of get involved in the process to help design a building that maybe looks like it's a little bit more in context with what's going on. I think there are challenges inherent in doing that. I think that there's a building on Main Street in Ossining that it looks like there was some attempt to make it look kind of contextual. It doesn't look to me like it's very contextual. It looks like the colors are kind of contextual. It's a brick-faced building next. It's actually I think it's on the screen here. I think it's kind of. Can you see it right over here?
We don't see your screen.
the background picture. You see the background picture?
Is it where the vegan restaurant is downstairs?
Yeah, it's like over here, I think, or something like that. They converted but maybe I'm thinking about it incorrectly. Or maybe it's on the other side of the street, but it's
Upper Main Street.
Yeah, it was. It's a new building.
Yeah.
It's probably 5 or 10 years.
I know the building. We all know the building. Yeah.
And so I think that there should always be consideration when you're doing that. But there are other areas where new developments I think are under consideration. And maybe one of the comments that the board may want to give on some of these new developments, especially if they're going to be like small infill housing on blocks that aren't necessarily considered historic, but do have a preponderance of older homes. HPC providing a comment, or a member or members of the HPC providing comment to say like, hey, you're going to put a new house here, a new development of townhouses here, instead of just putting in something with this metal facing and kind of ugly, stuff that you're seeing a lot of these days. I don't know if you've seen the metal paneling that they're putting on a lot of these new buildings. Instead of doing that, they have hardy board panels that can go up on buildings that look, architecturally significant. They fit in with the Victorian style of buildings, right? So if you say, look, we have this older housing stock, we don't want people to tear down 100-year-old homes. They're still great homes. We do realize there needs to be some infill. So where the infill takes place, let's try to put homes in that are contextual and consistent with that. And so in that sense, even though things are not being presented to you because it's not in a Main Street district, there are other areas that I think that you could say, look, we know it's not technically a historic district because too much of that character has been changed over time. But enough of it remains that new buildings that come in should be architecturally contextual and that are going to sort of enhance what's going on there rather than being so starkly different that it takes away, especially when, if nothing else, you consider the sort of the level of quality that some of these old houses were made with 100 years ago. They were made to last 100 years. And the quality of some of these new houses sometimes is reflective of property that's supposed to last 30 years. And I see it in my neighborhood. I live in a 110-year-old Queen Anne Victorian house. My block is a designated historic landmark. But it's not like all of the other houses in the neighborhood aren't old. They're just not in the landmark. So some of the new stuff, the infill stuff that's getting put in, it's not only is it not contextual, which I don't think it necessarily has to be, but it's not of even a comparable quality. So it creates challenges in the community. It makes this sort of patchwork of housing styles. The setbacks are different, right? So everybody else has a setback of a certain amount from the street, and these are right on the street, right? So those are other kinds of, I think, problems that should be considered when new developments come in. And again, so the HPC can play a role in that and helping to guide that. Because everything that everyone has described here, I think, is about the love of Ossining as a village. And part of what, to me, makes me feel like I'm in a village, I'm in a place where it's got a community and a sense of place, is that it has some sort of consistency in what it is. And that doesn't mean that every house is the same. I think what it means is there's a consistency in the level of quality that you have out there, right? I don't know if any of you have ever traveled to Latin America. I lived in Mexico for 6 months. My father's from Mexico. And in Latin America, you'll see a mansion next to a shanty, right? There's the lack of consistency a lot of times in Latin America because the protection, the zoning laws, they don't necessarily exist in the same way they do in the United States. And so I think that one way that you sort of build community through the development of housing is as new projects come online, you try to keep them at a level of quality that's consistent with what the community expects. Because if you don't engage in that process, you're going to get what you get a lot of times. So that's my 2 cents.
So I want to piggyback in a little bit of what Philip was referring to. We actually on the board, I was a member on the board. We used to call it the We Can Do Space, which used to be a village-owned parking lot there that a couple of years back it was sold to a developer. And one of the intents, my briefly recollection on the HPC level, because the HPC was involved on this particular building, it was not really to replicate any historic details. It was more like to complement the district itself. So that's one thing that I remember with Joanne Toll and Deborah Van Steen going over some of the details at that time, and Miguel Hernandez and all the past board members on HPC, where we, and especially, if you look at not going too far, if you go to New York City, you'll find, small pieces of history buried between glass buildings, or buried between these new 3-4 stories high. But there's an element that kind of ties back into the history. So I think that was one of the things that the HPC at that time, and even when we're going to the architectural guidelines, we always were interested in, we knew at that time that, the south part of Main Street was never going to be a historic district. We know that. But we wanted to make sure that other side, whenever that gets developed, it has to complement the historic portion of it. So that was one of the things that if some of the board members, I'm not sure if they have done it yet, or maybe they should at some point. And I want to say 2013, 2014, we did do a study of a massing study on what could we have on those empty lots, and again, that was very conceptual. It was nothing. It was more like, what if this will happen? How high can we go? How many units can we have? It was very conceptual. It's just literally, I want to call it a massing study on that point. So that kind of development at some point of time, I don't know when, that may be happening there. So I want to make sure that, as we go through the process of the comp plan, that area, we always talked about a couple of years back in HPC, and probably Adam, you may remember this. I always said, we should create some sort of an overlay that will kind of, I don't want to say protects, but kind of complements the historic district of that area, if that would be possible. And Jaime, you brought up Mexico. I'm not sure, but in Ecuador, where I'm from, this actually, I live in a historic district where actually they're very protective of what they have. And the highest building in there is the municipal building, which is about 4 stories high and is a very colonial building. But again, there's other areas now that have developed and they're like 10 stories, 15 stories high. What is interesting in Ecuador is that in the capital, Quito, is 2 districts. They call them the New Quito and the Old Quito. And that is a total different, you go to the old portion of the capital and you see gorgeous buildings that have been preserved, and then you go to the new portion, it's totally different. You know, there's two different characters, obviously, and different countries and different parts of the world are different. But you know, we here in
Yeah,
Austin,
my father is from Mérida, which is not quite as big as Quito, I don't think.
yeah,
Mérida in Yucatan in Mexico, and so there's about 1 million people there, and it has like a zona. They have a Zócalo, which is like the central. In Mexico, it's the central square, and you have the governor's mansion, and you have like the cathedral, and you have that's where all the main stuff, Casa de Bellas Artes, things like that. There's a little historic part, but once you get out of that, it gets a little
yeah.
kind of up in the air. It's all dependent on how much money the individual property owner has, how big the house is. So they all kind of started out these same small plots, and
No, that's very interesting. History and architecture come very a long way. But kind of going back to what the HPC role, I think you know, hopefully that by tomorrow Jaime will be able to clarify the emails that have been going back and forth. But I think me personally, I think the HPC has a big role to play on the you know, on the participation for the comp plan. Because we do want to keep, you know, we want to preserve the history on the, this is the village of Austin. And that's, you know, that's what a lot of people come, you know, they're being attractive to what the different characters are here in our village. So even if it's a house, the colonial style, or if it's the downtown, the very historic districts, and what is there, what has more from that. We have a lot of history, and I think we need to preserve that history. You know, and I think again the HPC definitely should be members. All the members should be very involved in what the process could be, and it should be.
Catherine, did you want to?
Yeah, I would love the HPC to be involved in protecting some of the buildings, especially along the waterfront, that have amazing potential to be used for the community, not, you know, for private use and be snatched up by a developer to make into luxury condos or something. There are opportunities there to really use what we have, and for theater, for community, like for youth centers and community centers and theater opportunity. There's just, I drive by those buildings and I'm just filled with terror that something's going to happen to them. And I would love the HPC to point that out to the village and to really try to make that happen. That would be something I'd love to see.
Are these properties that are currently owned by the village, or are they properties that are currently privately owned?
I don't know enough. I know, yeah, I really don't know enough to speak to that, but there's some, I don't know. That's what I guess I'd like to look into. I just feel like what we've been through, things can sort of happen overnight, and that's left kind of a bad taste in our mouth for, you know, we have to be proactive about protecting places, because we don't always know what's going on, I guess, you know, with sales. So I don't know enough about it, but I'd like to learn more about it. And it seems like this would be the time to learn more about it and to put the idea into the village, you know, mayor and the trustees and everyone. That would be a good opportunity, I think, to tie the community and the history and the architecture and the waterfront. And if the opportunity is there, I don't know. Hopefully it is.
That's great. That's good. Any questions for me?
Thank you, Catherine, and thank you, everyone. Thank you, Manny and Phil, Joyce, and Stephen for your comments. Sorry, I'm in the darkness. I'll try my best to. I'll just add two things and wrap it up. You know, Jaime, I think you'll find that this is a pretty reasonable, pragmatic group of people. You know, HPCs elsewhere are some of the most disparaged land use commissions in their respective communities. And that's because they are or have a reputation for being elitist, for being fixated on keeping precious little details in place and freezing all development at no matter what cost. And that's not this HPC. I think we, as I said, have suffered some really terrible blows in terms of not just the loss of buildings, but also the proliferation, really, of really the insensitive structures, some of which have actually fallen off their lots. So we as a village need to be paying closer attention to these large-scale developments that there's a tremendous amount of pressure to have built up on this precious waterfront property of ours, and make sure that they are historically sensitive. And that doesn't mean mimicking 19th century buildings. Our architectural guidelines, and I echo the sentiment that's articulated in them, I think they're from 2013, the objective of responsible development from a historic preservation standpoint is not mimicry, but sensitivity. And one shining example in my view, and I speak only for myself, is our library, which, by the way, replaced a pretty interesting building, a historic building, a Carnegie Library. But what was put in its place, in my view, is a tremendous achievement from a historic preservation standpoint, because it blends, again, in my view, seamlessly, even though it's super modern and glass and metal and all that, in its scale, in its proportions, it fits in. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what everyone on this commission would like to see moving forward. Moving forward, I think this commission might appreciate a greater and perhaps more formal role to play in architectural review. Right now, our planning board and the architectural review board are one and the same. And it would be interesting if HPC had a more formal role to play when projects come up that either directly affect a building that's, say, older than 50 years, or that are adjacent to buildings that are older than 50 years or 60 years. Those are the 2 points I wanted to add to everyone else's comments, Jaime. Again, to sum up, this HPC, as I understand it, is not in favor of freezing things in place, anti-development. Everything has to look the way it looked in the 19th century, no matter what. I don't think that's this HPC, and that's certainly not what Joyce meant by her comments. I mean, she wants, the character and the sense of this place, and the history of this place preserved. In addition, I wanted to add that I know in the past there had been some talk of expanding HPC's role, or maybe expanding its advisory relationship with the Architectural Review Board. I, for one, would be in favor of that. So that's it. That's my piece. And please, if anyone else wants to add anything, do so. But
I do have a follow-up question to that comment, if I could ask it. So, I've heard that there are 2 separate components of what the HPC does. and the role I think that you see that the HPC does. One is the identification and preservation of existing historic properties and districts in the village. And the other is the review of proposals to help make sure that they are sensitive to the historic districts within which they're being built or around which they're being built. Those are kind of two separate things.
The latter is not something that has been sort of formalized in section 270.25 of the code. We don't have automatic authority, certainly, or even automatic sort of referral or advisory powers when historically sensitive areas or projects are involved. So I, for one, would advocate a more robust role for the HPC. I mean, landmarking is hard business. We've really been through the ringer trying to get it done. And I think it would be useful to the community if advocates for historic preservation were involved in the process where historically sensitive but not landmarked or landmark district properties are involved. Now, that could be an interesting thing to include in the comprehensive plan. You know, the HPC is relatively young. I'm not talking about the membership, but the actual body. I think it did come out of the last comprehensive plan. It'd be interesting if its authorities were expanded in the new one. And Jaime, I'll also add this, you know, there was a feeling, I didn't so much feel this in my time on the HPC, but there was a real feeling among some of the previous generation that the HPC was the last to find out about significant projects in the village that might have an effect on historic properties, even if not landmarked, but properties of historic interest. And, you know, I would suggest that as planning director, one of the useful roles you could play is being a facilitator of communication and exchange between the various land use boards. Quick example, 65 Main Street. There's this old crumbling red brick building that is not part of the Main Street Historic District. And from everything I can see, a sensitive, sort of historically minded, preservation minded developer purchased it and is planning to redevelop it into, I think, some housing and a restaurant. You know, HPC was not involved in any way in participating in the planning board process or I don't know if it's gone to architectural review board yet, but
planning board and ARB are the same. So yeah, EAR and planning board are the same board. So yes, it has.
So, you know, if I had my way, I would say with a property like that is literally just over the border of the historic Main Street District, it really would be nice if HPC were and if the planning department could let HPC know about such projects. You know, I happened to get wind of it and I attended one meeting and I was pleased with what I saw. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not the HPC, but as planning director, I think would be a very useful function, you know, at least until our powers are expanded, perhaps under this comprehensive plan in the works. But until such time, I think you, Jaime, could serve a useful function, you know, as an intermediary and facilitator of communication about projects that the HPC might find worth knowing about.
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things I spoke with the Board of Trustees about last week, and this is kind of coming up as a part of the EAC work with wetlands process, but it's, you know, for me, I think one of the most important things that the planning and the building department can do is really make sure that when applications come in, when developers or homeowners or whoever it is come in and they want to get a project done, that village staff takes the project seriously, takes their investment seriously, does the review as quickly as possible, but at the same time is as thorough as can be. And so if we start a process where we kind of send them to one board, and then that board looks at it for a few months and they say, oh, maybe we should send it to this other board, and then that other board gets to look at it, and eventually a process that if everyone had been notified early on that needed to be notified, the process could have taken 3 months or 4 months. Instead, the process drags out to a year because all of the players weren't brought in to discussion when they should have been. And part of that is the intake process. Part of the problem is with the intake process in the planning and building department. So we're looking to amend that process to have something that works better for everyone involved, including the person who has their money on the line, has the investment on the line, but also all of the boards, because just like I think everybody comes in, they want to have their piece heard. I think a lot of investors are really amenable to making changes in the second month of the process that they're a little bit more frustrated by at the 8th month of the process, because they've already invested a significant amount of money developing a vision, paying lots of people to develop a vision that was okay up until that point.
Yeah, it would be more valuable if we were brought in earlier rather than later, and then can weigh in. And
it just makes the whole process easier.
2 points. It makes the whole process easier and beneficial to both sides. Yeah. Right. I have to run, but this has been a very good roundtable. Maybe we should do more of this.
Sorry if I kept everybody here longer than they anticipated on being here.
No, you didn't. It was worthwhile having this conversation. Okay. All right. See you next month. Good night. Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you for your participation.
All right. Okay, Adam, back to you.
That's it. Yeah, I too wasn't expecting the meeting to go this long, but I think our time has been well spent. Unless anyone has anything else they wish to add, I'd make a motion to adjourn this evening's meeting.
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you, Jaime, for once again facilitating this. Hopefully the kinks will be worked out next time, and Dana and I will figure it out. Won't be late. And Manny, thank you very, very much for your support as always at the HPC. We appreciate it. And everyone take care and stay safe.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
All right.